This is the Mile High Magnum DAK Draper, and you're listening to Wrestling with Johners podcast.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is, I want to welcome you all to a very special episode. Every single episode of Wrestling with Johners is special, of course, but this is our 150th episode of Wrestling with Johners. And for an extra special episode, such as our 150th show, it's only fitting to have an extra special guest for this special occasion. Please can I introduce to you current Ring of Honor star and the 2019 Top Prospect Tournament winner, the Mile High Magnum, DAK Draper. So DAK, brilliant to have you on the Wrestling with Johners podcast, my friend. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I hit the gym really hard today, ate some steaks, so business as usual.
I'll tell you what, DAK, it's really, really warm over here in the UK, and you're probably used to the temperature over there in the States, but we've had temperature over here in the 30s, mid-30s, and us Brits, we don't cope too well with the warm weather. What's it like over there? What's summertime like over there for you on the East Coast?
Well, it was really hot out. I don't know the temperatures in, centigrade? We were like up in like the 90s, which would be 90s Fahrenheit. And then we had a tropical storm blow through, and our power was out for a couple hours, and it's actually cooled things off a lot. It's like 70 degrees. It's a little cloudy, though, which sucks because I love going to the pool. With quarantine, one of the only things that I'll do, because I don't want to be around a lot of people, is I'll go to our pool because they like keep people separate and stuff. Yeah. And I have lost that opportunity this week because it's been so cloudy and rainy, so I'm pretty pissed off about it.
We've had temperatures up in the kind of the 30s and mid-30s centigrade, and I think that's around about 80 plus Fahrenheit, so
okay,
pretty warm.
That's a little warm. Steamy.
Yeah, and I was speaking to Mike Seidel a couple of weeks ago, and he said it was into the 40s centigrade. So I think that's probably touching nearly 100 Fahrenheit where you go, where he was anyway. So very, very warm conditions. This summer is going to be a steamer for sure. But let's get into some of the questions then, because it's fantastic to have you on the podcast. It really, really is
great,
a special occasion. Yeah, 150th episode. We've worked hard to get here. What a great guest to have on our special episode. But I mean, 2019, to a lot of people from looking from the outside in, 2019 was a great year for you, a real breakout year for you. 2020 promised to be an even better year though, DAK, to be honest with you, especially after winning the tournament last September, the Top Prospect Tournament. You've been involved in some of the high profile matches, including your match with Dragon Lee. I think that was in February. But that was for the show. That's right. That was for the TV title. We're going to get into all of that. But I mean, the last 6+ months of not being able to wrestle, that must be somewhat frustrating for you, quite tough on you. I mean, you're a natural athlete, you're a natural competitor. Just when your Ring of Honor career was really starting to take off, but how have you been feeling over the last 5 or 6 months, and how have you been coping with not being able to get in the ring and wrestle?
So luckily for me, I kind of went through something like this a year ago. So when I first signed with Ring of Honor, I wasn't allowed to wrestle independent matches anymore. And so I didn't wrestle for like 6 months because I was part of the Ring of Honor dojo system where they started a developmental system. And so I spent 6 months, all my matches were practice matches in a warehouse. I wasn't in front of a crowd at all. And then at least when that was happening, all my friends were still allowed to have matches. And so I'm watching everyone else wrestle. And then I'm just sitting in the back. I'm not getting to do anything. It's like the kid riding the bench. I hated it so much. I've never been the guy on the bench. And so I hated that so much. So I was kind of prepared for it, where this time when it struck, I was like, okay, I need to develop an action plan. I need to make progress. So I've really poured myself into fitness and just trying to like come back as good as I possibly can be.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a bit about your fitness then, because you're a big guy. I mean, you're all of what, 6'5", 240, 250 pounds. Have I got your weight right about there? Now. Yeah. So I mean, you've got a great look when you're in the ring, a fantastic physique. What
You've
goes
got great
into
eyesight.
Well, indeed. It's hard not to spot that when you're in the ring in your almost Speedos, to be honest with you, with what you wear. But what goes into maintaining that look, both from a fitness standpoint and from a nutrition standpoint? What goes into keeping the Mile High Magnum at its peak physical condition 24/7 then?
So it's definitely 2 hours in the weight room a day, 6 days a week, 2 hours in the weight room, and then 30 minutes a day of some kind of cardio. So like today, I did legs, and so if I do legs, I don't like to do anything where I'm like running or on a treadmill or a Stairmaster. So I had this big mace. I have some videos online too of me discovering using the mace and pushing out of the comfort zone, where I push myself out of my comfort zone. And so today, for like the last 20 minutes of my workout, I was doing all kinds of stuff where I'm swinging this mace around like it's a big battle axe and stuff. And it got my heart rate into that fat burning zone, which is above 120 beats per minute. And I try and spend some time there, at least burning some fat every day. And it's just a lot of time. And then nutrition is the big part, because if I'm not in the gym, I'm cooking. And so I'll typically eat close to 6 meals a day. It's chicken and rice, turkey and rice. Luckily, I'm so lean naturally, I can eat a lot of carbs. So I can keep the carbs pretty high, but moderate carbs, high protein, low fat. And it's Groundhog Day. It seems like the same thing, the same food out of Tupperwares every day. And at this point, it's like you're not even eating for taste. You're just eating for fuel.
Yeah. I mean, just switching subject slightly, is there any news on when the Ring of Honor dojo might be reopening for training sessions? I'm guessing that, it is not terribly soon, but have you heard anything about when the training might commence for the dojo students in particular?
I don't think, I have no idea. It's
no.
The big thing with Ring of Honor is like they want safety to be the number one priority. So yeah, I have no idea when those guys are going to be back training at the dojo. It's definitely something that that guys are chomping at the bit for. I've talked to some guys that are still in the dojo system, and they really want to get back in, because they feel like they're super stagnant, because like a lot of them haven't gotten opportunities with Ring of Honor yet. They're still trying to get on the radar. And so when you can't even be seen in that capacity, then I understand it though, because I've kind of felt like you're always trying to climb and be seen more. So I understand their frustrations.
Indeed. I think every wrestler out there is frustrated and can't wait to hit the ring. But I mean, over here in the UK, we're in the same situation. I don't think there's any wrestling promotions, no independent promotions over here in the UK that have opened their doors yet. I think 1 or 2 are planning for kind of like Halloween shows around the end of October, but that's still a little way off. So we'll see if that goes ahead. And I think they're all planning kind of outdoor venues as well to be a bit safer. But
that's pretty cool.
Let's talk a bit about your sporting background then, because you've always been very naturally sporty and very naturally athletic. Am I right in thinking that you were a very talented amateur wrestler in high school and possibly college, and football player as well? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's funny. I got into amateur wrestling because my mom hated me watching Monday Night Raw on TV when I was a kid. And so in order to watch Monday Night Raw, I had to go to wrestling practice at school, and I hated it. Like, I loved the wrestling part, but I hated the warm-ups. I hated any sort of running. And so in wrestling, there's so much more, in amateur wrestling, there's so much more running than you would think. And so I always hated the running, and I would try and hide in the bathrooms, and the coach would come find me and make me run. But I ended up getting good at it, and was a star in high school, was a star football player in high school also, and then wrestled in college. And then at the national tournament my senior year, right after I had my last amateur match ever, I lost the match that would have made me an All-American. I'm crying. I'm sitting in the stands. I have a towel over my head. And I hear this voice. It's like, is that Sammy Dale? And it was this Jerry Briscoe, who he's a WWE Hall of Famer, wrestling legend. I recognized him from when I was a kid, seeing him on WWE TV with Pat Patterson as Vince McMahon's
one of the Stooges. That's right.
And he's a scout for. He was a scout. I think he still is a scout for WWE. But he offered me a tryout, and they flew me down to Tampa, and I tried out, and didn't get signed from that tryout, but realized that wrestling could be an opportunity, and kind of took it from there. But
So how old would you have been at this point when you were first kind of scouted by Gerald Briscoe then?
I was 23.
Right.
Okay. It was my senior year in college, so I just turned 23. And,
was it amateur wrestling or football that was your passion then? What would you have liked to have gone kind of more serious in if you could?
So I didn't play football in college. I just amateur wrestled. I played football in high school. I was a better football player than wrestler in high school.
Right.
But I just really liked being in charge of my own destiny. I didn't like having to depend on a team for something. I didn't like to have to depend on other people to come through with their end of the bargain. I liked it to be, if I win, it's all me. And the few times that I lost, it was all me. And I really liked that, the accountability of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's what made me choose it.
No, that's really cool. And you said that you weren't, you had a trial when you were 23, but you weren't taken on straight away. When were you kind of given the call to, I mean, was you given a second trial? How did that process work? So how did you work your way from amateur wrestling and football to, to the squared circle? Talk us about that process and that transition for you.
So the way that they flew me down to Tampa. This is when it was FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling. And it was just like you were in FCW for a week. It's not like the tryouts are now where it's like boot camp style. And now the way the tryouts are, you don't meet in very many of the wrestlers or anything. This is like we were just part of the group for a week. And I didn't know anything. Like I was horrible. The only thing I did well was I cut a good promo. And by a good promo, I mean it was the least horrific of everyone else that was trying out. And I thought that they were going to sign me because of it. And I got this big head about it. And they said they'd be in contact in a month. And in a month later, I was crushed when they told me that I wasn't signed. I was living in, I went to college in the state of Nebraska. And I was living in Nebraska in this tiny town. And they told me they weren't going to sign me, but they said, I think you could do something in wrestling, but you have to get some training first. And there's a school 300 miles away. If you go to this school, like that'd be a good step. So by the end of the week, I'd moved to Denver, Colorado. I grew up in Colorado.
Yeah.
But I'd moved back to Colorado to join this wrestling school. And it was a little topsy-turvy. About 9 months later, I got another tryout. And halfway through, they pulled me aside and they were like, yeah, we're going to make you an offer.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned... Sorry, Sam. You mentioned that when you went to your first trial, it was FCW. Pretty soon after, it must have turned to NXT. I mean, because you were there during the NXT early years, weren't you?
Yeah. So the way that it worked for me, it was still called FCW for my second tryout. The week before I reported, I got signed, and a few months later, I reported. The week before I reported, everything changed from FCW to NXT. So I was very fortunate. But the first year, we were still in the FCW building. We were still in Tampa. The WWE Performance Center hadn't opened yet. So I was signed for 2 years. And the change in the system, the change in NXT that I experienced was astounding. We went from, there was a show where I wrestled against the Wyatt family and had, I think, 17 people in the crowd. And then that was when I was very new there, and probably the last 3 months I was there, not a single show didn't sell out. It was just amazing. Like and that's when they started the WWE Network while I was there, like all the live specials, all that. NXT went from just being like, oh, this thing that happens in Florida where some of the guys might get called up to being like, oh, this is a brand. And so that was kind of cool to experience and to be a part of. And it ended. I'm happy that I was released when I was, just for my own personal growth. But it was a great experience. I learned so much, like learning the basics from some of those coaches and the fundamentals that they put down. It has helped me immensely in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on it there, but if you look at the crop of amazing talent that were coming through at the time as well, you mentioned, Eric Rowan, Luke Harper, Bray Wyatt, the Wyatt family, they were all coming through at the same time. Other names that were around at that time, you had Dax Harwood, part of the Revival, FTR, of course, Big E, Pac, Cassius Ono, Trent Beretta, Baron Corbin, Madman, Sawyer Fulton, and so many others. It was quite a fantastic time around. I think it was probably around 2012, 2013 when a lot of these, and when yourself were kind of breaking in through the NXT system. So a pretty amazing time. Did you realize how special kind of that crop of talent was at the time then, Dak?
Never did. Well, I shouldn't say never did. You realize how good all the guys are that you're with, but I never really took the time to be present and to appreciate it, because when you're there, you want to do so well, I think, that you're always either analyzing what's going on. You can never just be like, wow, I get to work with the best wrestlers in the world, with some of the best wrestlers in the world right now. And instead I'm always thinking about like, oh, well, they didn't want me to do this drill. What does that mean? And you're always kind of job scared and worried about where you stand. And I really think that I think that I needed to be released to be able to just take a breath and relax. Because at that point I was so new when I got signed that I had never had fun wrestling yet. I'd just been nervous. And it was so awesome to be immersed with those great wrestlers, though, because I was talking to Chris Hero yesterday. I asked him questions about wrestling all the time. And I rode with Dax Harwood for over a year. Just the stuff that he taught me, just talking about how you put a match together in the car. And just like the role models that you have there, your peers that like rub off on you is it was an education that you couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's touch on that a bit further, because you mentioned Chris Hero, and he is a legend of the sport and a true genius at what he does, and Dax Harwood and many of the other names that we mentioned already. But you a lot of them came from the indies. A lot of them came from a pro wrestling background. So a lot of them were familiar. They knew the ropes. They, were just fine tuning, I suppose, and looking to make a bigger name for themselves. You didn't come from pro wrestling. You didn't come from the indies. You came from amateur wrestling and football. So did you feel that you had to work harder to maybe fill the gaps, or to maybe catch up with some of the others? Or did you feel that you had other talents that maybe kind of outshone others in other ways because of your sporting background? How did that work?
I think you really need, the biggest thing is you can't, if you come from a college sport or a professional sport, I think you need to realize that like you just have to relax to wrestle. If you can't relax, if you can't be comfortable, then you're always going to be so tense, and it's never going to come across. It's never going to be authentic. Billy Gunn told me, if you're not having fun, the crowd's going to sense it, and they're not going to have fun. And it's so true. Because I feel like I went from being so hardwired to amateur wrestling. It's so intense, and everything is so gritty, and you're just butting heads all the time. You have to work with someone. You have to be able to almost be a dance partner. You have to, if they zig, you have to zig. You can't zag. Yeah. And so I thought that it was more of a detriment to not have very much professional wrestling experience going in, because there are also things that are, when they're new to you and they're not new to other people, other people learn that by experience. So Chris Hero and Sami Zayn and Dax Harwood, those guys, they all had experienced making mistakes, and then they had learned from it that way, which is way different than a coach telling you, hey, don't do this because this will happen. You haven't experienced it. You've just been told it. And so I think I was excited, actually, when I got released, because I had listened to Hero and I'd listened to Sami Zayn, hearing them talk about the indies and times that they had messed up and not gotten in trouble for it. Because who's going to yell at you? The promoter? Like, that's nothing compared to having WWE officials yell at you.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I was really happy to be able to relax and to have fun wrestling and to make it something that I enjoyed. And so I do think it was a detriment.
Yeah. But sticking with your kind of natural athleticism, you could say. Now, I've seen a lot of your matches, and one thing that really stands out is, you're a big guy, 6'5", 250 pounds. Now, naturally, guys of that size are great with power moves. Now, you do all the power moves, but you're also very athletic as well. I mean, you do moves off the top rope. You kind of bounce up onto the top rope to do your moves. Yeah. You do the kip ups. You do kind of a lot of moves that's not naturally natural for a 6'5", 250-pound guy. But when did you start incorporating the more athletic side into your kind of power-based repertoire?
The day I got released, the day after I got released, I got very drunk, falling down drunk at a bar, and Chris Hero picked me up and took me home. The very next day he called me and he's like, you're not drinking today. We're going to go to this wrestling school. We're going to go to this gym that has a wrestling ring, and we're going to work on a move set for you. And so we went there, and I started doing all this stuff that I had never done in NXT. And he was like, why didn't you do this in NXT? And I was like, I was scared to. They told me to follow this formula. And I started doing the athletic stuff, and it was so fun to do. And it started to get good reactions when I did it in front of a crowd. And so it started with that little run up the ropes with the little, where I bounce onto the top rope. It started with that. And then it just kind of carried from there. And there have definitely been times when I've gone too far with it. Once I tried to jump from being in the ring to the top rope without the little run up the ropes, and just slipped on the ropes and fell out of the ring, which was awesome. Very painful. But I don't know. I think a lot of it also comes from my freshman year in college. I lost 46 pounds to be on varsity. I went from 230 to 184 in a very short period. But being a big guy that all of a sudden was a medium-sized guy, I was just really skinny. I had to wrestle guys that were so much more agile than me and so much faster than me. So you have to adapt. And so I think I adapted. I became a lot more athletic that year. And so I think I got to be a light guy for like 6 months, and I kept a little bit of agility from that.
Yeah.
No. So if you want to be agile, lose a lot of weight for a while.
yeah. But I mean, for anybody that needs to see some DAK Draper matches, then I mean, check out the Lucha Libre Laughs YouTube channel, and I think you've got your own YouTube page as well, haven't you, DAK?
Yeah, I do. It has a lot of old matches. You'll probably see a lot of Sammy Six Guns matches, which is what the first name I went by after I was released from NXT. And yeah, you'll see a lot of old matches. You'll see a lot of matches where I was definitely trying stuff out, where I was really discovering who I was and trying to and going through the process of becoming who I am now.
Indeed. Just a couple more questions, still sticking around NXT, if that's okay. Now, I understand that you were lucky enough to have many great trainers as part of the NXT developmental system, but Nick Dinsmore was your kind of main guy, wasn't he? I think he was the trainer that you bonded with the most and probably worked with you the most. Now, tell us about, Nick Dinsmore, for those that aren't aware, might be familiar with his Eugene character in WWE, of course, but, Nick was quite a crucial part of your development during those years in NXT. Was he? Tell us why Nick was such an important part of your time in NXT.
Nick was so honest with us when he came in. I was upset that I was in his class because the classes were tiered, so they had different levels. And Nick's first month as a trainer, I was coming off of an injury, coming back to the ring, and he was teaching the beginners class. And I had been there for probably 8 months, and I was in the beginners class. And I had been in higher classes before, like every month it changes. And so I was pissed. And it was the best thing that's probably ever happened for me as a wrestler, because he just slowed everything down that I did. And he really focuses on footwork. He really focuses on your fundamentals. He'll tell you, he said that he couldn't comfortably throw a punch in a match for 10 years. So he focused on everything else to make it that much better. And he was so big on just your footwork has to be perfect. Your bumps, they have to be perfect. The way that you do things, it was just, everything was through experience. He didn't want you to just hear something. He'd be like, all right, let's lock up and do this. And he would get in there and wrestle around with us. The first day he had his wrestling boots on, and I had never had a coach show up with their wrestling boots on. And also he was one of the boys. Like he would, at the end of practice, he'd be like, all right, he'd bring us all in and go, all right, what's the Stooge report? And it was just kind of he wants to tell him a funny story or something. It was just always, he was one of those guys who he was more, I look at it almost like he was a coach, but he carried himself more just like an extreme veteran where he's been there, and he talked to me like we could be wrestling on the same show. Like he knew more, but he never talked down to you. He talked to you eye to eye. And I really respected that. And he organically could get a lot out of you. And I didn't even notice how much better I had gotten in that month. At the end of the month, they bumped me up to the next class up. And the first guy I went with was Buddy Murphy, who I think might have been the last guy I went with before I got hurt. And afterwards, we just did like a simple drill. He goes, he's like, mate, you've gotten so much better. It was, and I don't know, it's kind of cool when you don't think that you're progressing like that. And then someone just calls it out immediately that Dinsmore could have that effect. And I don't think I realized how good of a coach Dinsmore was until I was out of his class. And I can see how much I had progressed from when I'd been in the higher classes before. Yeah. Which is, I guess, what a great coach does. They make you better without you even realizing it.
Indeed, yeah. And then, did you have much interaction while you were there with either Triple H or Dusty Rhodes? Now, everybody's got a Dusty Rhodes story, and I know that there's so many fun stories of his promo classes where Dusty would, kind of help or interact with the talent as they were trying to work their way through promo classes. But did you receive any kind of feedback from Hunter or any of the officials there, or have any interaction with Dusty? You got any funny stories from those times backstage with NXT then, Dak?
So Dusty was such a treat, and I wish that I knew I wish I had been a little bit more experienced to be around Dusty, because there's so much stuff that just went over my head, or things he says, or things that he said that I think about now that I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. But at the time, it just was like he was speaking a different language. But one of my favorite things is, this is when I was working closely with Dinsmore. We were doing this wild man character where I was the wild man Travis Tyler, and I believed in all these conspiracy theories, and I talked about my bunker that I had, and I was always wearing camo. I had long hair and a beard, and I was talking about getting like a camouflage suit to wear around. Dinsmore told Dusty that I was going to buy a full-on like tree costume, and so I cut my promo that week, and I don't know this, and Dusty goes, "That was great, but what about this tree?" And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, "I heard that you're going to Bass Pro Shops and you're going to buy a giant tree costume." And I was like, no, I'm thinking about getting this camo suit. And before I could even explain myself, he goes, "We put all this work into a character and you want to walk around dressed like a Christmas tree?" I'm not even going to try and do a bad Dusty impression because mine is so bad. I'm not even going to try to do it.
I was waiting for it, but no, that's fine.
Like, you go to Bass Pro Shops, then you're going to walk around like a damn Christmas tree in Times Square.
Fantastic.
It was, and I'm just sitting up there stammering like, oh God. It was pretty funny. So that was a little rib from Dinsmore there. It was good. And then Triple H, I was in Triple H's workout DVD that, it was the Triple H Power Series DVD. I was in the back. I was one of the guys working out in that. And that was really cool to see how busy Triple H is and how he keeps his priorities, where it's like, even if he's gone all day, he'll drink a giant espresso to get a workout in before he goes to bed. Like, he really, like, he knows what's valuable to him, and he goes after it. It's impressive to see somebody manage their time as well as Triple H.
He's a workhorse. I mean, you hear stories of him, being up at 5 a.m., working all day, and then doing a workout with Stephanie at midnight. And then, they've got children, they've got a family, but their professional careers is just mind blowing, to be honest with you, the way they handle it. But very impressive. Thank you very much for the Dusty story there, and not a bad impression. But there we go. So for any of my listeners that aren't aware, and you mentioned at the top of the podcast, you are a Colorado native. Originally from Denver. Now, if any of my listeners have been living under a rock, or unless they've been living under a rock, many of my recent interviews have included many of the Denver-based talent from Lucha Libre Laughs, including Anaya, Mike Seidel, Nick Gossett, of course, the founder and promoter of Lucha Libre Laughs, and of course Royce Isaacs. Now, being a Denver native, after your WWE or NXT career, you kind of headed back to Denver, didn't you? But how did that relationship between yourself and Triple L, Lucha Libre Laughs, begin? I mean, was it a company that you were aware of while you were in NXT, and how did you kind of get that invite to start with them?
So moving back to Denver was a horrible decision on my part. It's not a good area to live for independent wrestling, especially in 2014. It was a really bad area to live for independent wrestling. But I moved back because that was home and I had friends there. And I was living in Denver, and I saw on Facebook that there was a wrestling show called Lucha Libre Laughs happening about like 4 blocks away from where I lived. And I went to check it out, and it was half comedy and half wrestling. And then I remember the thing that stands out, 2 things stand out most. Royce Isaacs was wearing a jock strap. He was wearing a cup, like the cup part, the hard part to protect you. I had never seen someone wear a cup in a match before, and it looked so weird. And I think I went to the back and was like, "Hey, man, don't wear a cup. It looks really weird." And there was a kid that was in a lucha match, a very bad lucha match, and he tried a shooting star press and just landed in a back bridge on the mat. It was, I thought he was dead. It was one of the worst botches I have ever seen. And those are the 2 things that stood out. But I thought it seemed like a fun show. There weren't many people there. And Nick, the promoter, messaged me, I think afterwards. He was like, "Hey, I saw that you were at Lucha Libre Laughs. I'd like to use you for the next show." And so I did. And I had the most fun I had ever had at a wrestling show up to that point. And I was hooked from there. And Nick Nick, the story that I tell people about Nick as a promoter, there was a time soon after this where I had run completely out of money. And I had mentioned to Nick that, like, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to buy groceries for the next couple of days. This is on a Wednesday before a Friday, maybe a Tuesday before a Friday show. Nick paid me that day so I could buy groceries for the show that was going to happen later. And I thought that really meant a lot to me. It just shows what a good guy Nick is. Also, he hates when I tell that story, so I like to tell that story.
But I mean, it's fair to say that Lucha Libre Laughs has become a bit of a spiritual home for you, to be fair. I mean, you were there, 2015 and 2016. You had a fantastic run as Sammy Six Guns, of course. You even had a tag title run with Danger Dean as one half of the Denim Club, if I'm not mistaken. So
love Danger Dean.
Tell us about that. Your first run with Lucha Libre Laughs. Would it be fair to say that you had a lot of fun with Triple L in them 2 years?
So much. It's Triple L still is. That's the place where I learned to have fun. That's the place where I really, really got a lot of my personality as a wrestler. Interacting with the comedians too. It was like that taught me so much, because just like the showmanship of the show, it's so entertainment based. And then the crowd is, I'd say the crowd is only like 2/3 of a wrestling crowd.
Yeah. And
so, or 1/3 of a wrestling crowd, probably 2/3. They're just people that want to have a fun time. And so the reactions are so much more genuine. It's like you feel like more like you're at a WWE type show where it's and especially the way Colorado wrestling was at the time, a lot of the shows, the only fans that came were family and friends. And so to be able to wrestle in front of people that weren't related to the wrestlers was amazing. But I'm going to say this first. I'm the most important person to Lucha Libre and Laughs that has never held the title, their heavyweight championship. I'm probably more important than like 3/4 of their heavyweight champions. But so I started there. I wrestled their champion, Xander Creed, and we had a really fun match. I thought that you were supposed to tell jokes when you came out, and you were not. You should leave that to the comedians. So my music plays. I walk out. I told 2 horrible jokes, and then they had given me a T-shirt to throw into the crowd of one of the sponsors. And I thought it was taped up, and it wasn't. And I didn't realize the crowd was really far away. And so I went to throw it into the crowd because we're on stage, and it unraveled and didn't even make it to the crowd. So I told 2 really horrible jokes, threw a T-shirt that didn't even make it to the crowd, and then had to wrestle. And I still had a ton of fun there. And just being in the back, like the environment, it was just something like I had never been in before, where I'd been in this like very clean, sterile environment of like the WWE system. And so to go to Lucha Libre and Laughs, where it's just like it was just like the locker room at the time, especially, was like small and dirty, and it was so much. It was almost like watching the show Shameless. There was just so much personality to it, and it had me hooked immediately. And then Nick liked me as a wrestler, and he would do all kinds of stuff. Like we did stuff with the comedians where we'd film like little shorts as Sammy Six Guns, and we'd go do stuff outside of just wrestling, and I love the creative part of it. And so Nick really got like the creative juices flowing for me. And my friend Danger Dean started wrestling there, and we became a tag team, the Denim Club. And so Danger Dean, my first go around in Colorado wrestling, when I didn't get signed by WWE, I was trained by Pat Tanaka for about 9 months, and he would get me booked around Colorado. And Dean was like kind of like a big brother to me, where he had been around for a while, and we wrestled a few times, and he always took really good care of me. And so it was cool to be able to team up with Dean. And it was two guys who were friends in real life, having so much fun and putting on great matches. And I really I love Lucha Libre and Laughs. I still think one of the best matches that ever happened in Denver was it was Sammy Six Guns versus Chris Hero. And I remember we were fighting in the crowd, in that Lucha Libre and Laughs crowd, where it's like there's beer spilled everywhere. You hear people cussing.
It's just the Oriental Theater.
Yeah, this is at the Oriental Theater. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't nervous at all. I was just having fun in the match. And I realized what it should feel like to have a good wrestling match. And so like I think I discovered myself at Lucha Libre and Laughs.
Yeah, and just
but don't tell Nick Gossard I said
that. but I mean, your time as Sammy Six Guns, it gave you an opportunity. To delve more into character work and to help bring out the fun side of your personality and to have fun with a less serious gimmick. So whereas WWE NXT was more regimented. Yes, you got the promo classes and you had a great personality there. Lucha Libre Laughs and Sammy Six Guns really brought out a great character, didn't it?
I feel like the training wheels came off where if when you're learning how to ride a bike, if you don't have the training wheels, you're going to fall and it might hurt, but you get back up. And so you learn by experience. And it pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I'm so glad that I got that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Now, first of our listener questions, and probably this person might be more familiar to you than to me, but Hunter Gray, Rocky Mountain Man Beast, he sent in a tweet for this interview saying, your thoughts on the legacy of his doppelganger father, Sammy Six Gun Senior. So tell us about Sammy Six Gun Senior then.
So Sammy Six Gun Senior, is awesome. He is at the time, I think he was like a 50-year-old man, very short, very bald, and a cartoon character of a man. He was wrestling before as the Polish Prince, and he talked in his entire life with this Polish accent. And so he was always walking around talking like this. But we found out later he's from Ohio. He's just really weird. And but I was like, hey, like, if I'm Sammy, and I made Sammy Six Guns Junior because I thought it would be like kind of a funny like joke that like I could always in promos talk about my dad that was like this big star in the territory before I was there, and but always not have him be a real person. And then I was like, oh my God, this is where Sammy Six Guns Senior makes his appearance. So he would walk me to the ring at shows, and he started walking Dangerously Handsome to the ring, Dangerously Handsome and the Denim Club to the ring. And along with IDT, who was a comedian, Ian Douglas Terry, who's hilarious. But the Polish Prince, a.k.a. Sammy Six Gun Senior, he has a knack for, as much as Nick Gossard and the other comedians and people who professionally communicate with an audience on a microphone, they know how bad he was at communicating, and they tried everything in their power to keep him from getting a microphone. And that man has such a skill for finding a live mic in a venue to just spout gibberish on. We'd be wrestling and he would try and get on the mic and the mic would be shut off. So we'd start the match is going on. All of a sudden I hear the Polish Prince just going, yeah, 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 yelling his gibberish on the microphone. And it was just kind of a normal thing. And he is quite the character. And I'm really glad that I got to meet the Polish Prince. And then my real life father passed away and I was like, yeah, let's stop joking around that you're my dad.
Yeah. And I think it was Nick that actually sent me a video of Sammy Six Gun Senior on a Colt Cabana video, having to cut Colt's promo for him. And that was the most hilarious 5-minute video I think I've ever seen.
That guy, he's a very funny character, but he has a heart of gold. He is he's looked out for people when other people haven't looked out for him. Also, like, there have been wrestlers that have become like homeless and stuff, and he's always like been the first one to be like, hey, you can stay at my place till you get on your feet. And he's a great guy. And like the main reason he got to do that character is because certain people cared about him so much and what a good guy he was. And he was a treasure in Colorado wrestling for about 18 months.
What a legend.
He was the kind of 50-year-old man that's going around and trying to get in fistfights with other 50-year-old men.
Oh, awesome. I've actually got a question from Nick Gossard, the founder and promoter of Lucha Libre Laughs, and the co-founder and promoter of Respect Women's Wrestling, both in Denver, of course. Now, Nick asks, ask Dak about taking an elbow drop from Bobcat Goldthwait. So I know that Nick recalled this conversation, this story in his interview that we had a few weeks ago, but tell us your version of events with taking an elbow from Bobcat.
Okay, so I was wrestling Nick Dinsmore, and we're in Omaha at Crom Comedy Fest in Omaha. And Bobcat Goldthwait is on the card. And Nick and I put this match together. And he goes, Bobcat Goldthwait's here. We got to use him. It just runs out of the locker room. And he's in full Eugene gear. And he tells Bobcat, he goes, and just one time, only one time, he goes over with Bobcat Goldthwait. who has never been involved in a professional wrestling match, tells him one time, here's what we're going to do. You're running from the crowd and you're going to drop an elbow. There were supposed to be 2 ref bumps. So Nick was supposed to get bumped, and then another ref was supposed to come out, and he was also supposed to get knocked out, and then Bobcat was supposed to come in. The other ref was this kid who was brand new. This was like his second show as a ref. He's taking his stuff off. Nick goes, hey, we need you for the main event. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah. And so WWE superstar Eugene is telling this kid who's brand new and so nervous, is telling this kid, hey, put your gear back on. Also goes over the spot with him only one time. So this kid's shaking in his little ref shoes. And so he's waiting there, watching out the curtain, waiting for his cue. Nick gets bumped. Bobcat just sees that ref bump and just runs straight in and counts the 3. So it's fine. We go with it, which makes it the greatest rib for that poor kid. So that kid's sitting there and he's nervous. And then his time never even came to run in. But then Bobcat counts the 3 and he gets up and Nick goes, drop an elbow on him. And Bobcat's like, what? And he goes, yeah, just drop an elbow on him. And so Bobcat goes to drop an elbow on me and just falls on me, which is fine because he's tiny. And then he rolls over on top of me. So now I'm on my back and Bobcat Goldthwait is face to face with me like this. And he goes, oh my God, are you all right? And I'm like, yes, our mouths are touching right now, Bobcat. It was good.
Oh, what a fantastic story. And so I've heard 2 sides, 2 versions of that story now, and it just gets better and better. But you've been back to Triple L more recently, haven't you? You've had DAK Draper instead of Sammy Six Guns, of course. You've had matches with Filter, Darren Corbin, and of course current Triple L heavyweight champion Anaya. Now, I've seen all 3 of those matches. First of all, I want to say Filter. He's a beast of a man, and he's probably the only man on the Triple L roster that can match you kind of size-wise. Certainly your 6'5" frame, I think, is about the same. But take us back. It's been a couple of years since you last wrestled for Triple L, and then going back and having these couple of matches. It must have been a blast to go back to the Oriental Theatre, to go back to Triple L, and have these 3 matches. Tell us about your experience of going back for a second time.
So I was really nervous. I was nervous that people wouldn't remember me. It was weird because I had been a part of the National Wrasslin League and it had just gone out of business. And I felt like I had really poured almost everything into the NWL. And so when it ended, I was pretty crushed. And this was going to be this was the most excited I had been for a show since NWL had closed. It was a few months later. And I had asked for Filter. Nick is great about that. He works with the wrestlers so well. He asked me who I wanted to wrestle, and I said Filter. And Filter is kind of like me, where he has an amateur wrestling background in high school. Filter's a guy that I wish would get out there more, but he can't because he's always going to jail, and so he can't leave the state a lot of times because he's a damn criminal. But he's taller than me, and he moves so well for his size. And I just thought it was a really good match where Filter and I just I think we did a good job of having this big man match. And you can hear how behind Filter the crowd is at the end too, where there's just something about him where he doesn't have to say anything. He could just kick somebody's ass. He's not the kind of guy that needs to have powerful words or anything. You can just tell by his demeanor that he can kick a guy's ass. But I thought it was cool because I think that's one of those matches where I'd had matches with Chris Hero and I'd had matches with a lot of guys where I felt like a better wrestler walking back through the curtain than when I had walked out. And I feel like Filter was a better wrestler at the end of that match than he was at the start of that match. And so that felt good for me that someone improved while we wrestled.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things from that, I think it was that night, there was a woman who met me she took a picture and bought a t-shirt. And then she was a middle-aged woman, and she thought that she was sending me direct messages on Twitter, but she was just tweeting at me, trying to meet up with me. And it was it's not like I gave her it was yeah, let's meet up or anything. She just said, hey, I want to see you again. And she was tweeting these things so everybody can see it. And it's are you at this are you at the Applebee's in Glendale? And you're really sexy. And all the wrestlers start retweeting it. And so it starts avalanching, getting these retweets. And this poor woman probably has a family at home, and she's pining after the Mile High Magnum. That was pretty. Nick loved that.
Awesome. And you touched on the National Wrasslin League. You were a big part of their program from 2017, 2018. You had some great matches. A lot of the stars that passed through there had matches with yourself, such as Haku, Barbarian, Stevie Richards, Marty the Moth, of course. You even held the National Wrasslin League Kansas City Championship. You were their champion for 9 months, which was fantastic. So you had a really great run in those 2 years with the NWL. But it appeared to be another really important time in your career, would you say?
Yeah, that's when Sammy Six Guns grew up. Sammy Six Guns grew up and became DAK Draper. I dropped a lot of the funny stuff. I dropped a lot of the colorful outfits and the colorful gear, and I definitely became more serious. And you can see the evolution throughout NWL, especially throughout 2017, as I just became better and better and better, because NWL they paid us to be full-time wrestlers. We had health insurance. We had access to a ring all the time and a gym. So it was that's where I really could turn the corner and just focus myself 100% on wrestling. I wasn't also working at a gym. I wasn't also trying to just have odd jobs. It was I was 100% focused, and it helped me immensely. And I think it's so beneficial for young wrestlers to move. I always tell guys that I want to get better, I want more opportunities. Then move, because if you're around the people that saw you when you started, you're never going to get a real gauge on where you're at, because they're comparing you to when you were awful. And so if you go to somewhere where you don't know anybody, then it's all on your abilities. It's not who you know. And I think going to Kansas City was it was so good for me there, because it's sink or swim. And I came in and I put a lot of emphasis on my mic work and my character work, and it obviously it spoke for itself. I became the Kansas City champion and became such a polarizing Kansas City champion. They were just oh no, that's the NWL championship now, because that's how it was. It was definitely viewed as the most popular championship. And I was the face of NWL, and it was such a good experience. And I definitely want to be the face of a company again, because that's an awesome spot to be in. It's tiring. You don't have much time. You're always busy, but there's no feeling in the world like it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about ROH then, DAK, because you did receive your break with ROH in, was it 2018? You had your first match. Yeah. So how did that kind of relationship, how did you get your first break? Who contacted who, and kind of how did it all start for you and ROH?
So I always tell guys to move, because you should move for opportunities. This was me moving to make my own opportunity. When the day NWL closed, we had a big show planned later that weekend, and the owner came in on a Wednesday. We're having a meeting, and he goes, "I'm shutting it down." The moment he said he was closing NWL, I knew I had to move to the East Coast. I knew I had to, just for wrestling, the cities are closer. Geographically, it makes sense. If you're a pro wrestler, you should live on a coast, because just driving, getting on shows, there's more opportunity for work. And so I knew I was going to move to the East Coast immediately. And I decided Baltimore, because Baltimore's close enough to the South, to the Mid-Atlantic, but also it's a drive. It's not a bad drive from New England, from New York, from Philly. It's close to everything. And when I was about to move to Baltimore, I found out that the Ring of Honor had just moved the Ring of Honor dojo to Baltimore. So I reached out to some of the coaches about hey, I'd like to come train, just because I wanted to make connections to get on some indie shows out here. And I just wanted to I didn't know anybody moving out there. It was a huge leap of faith. And so I started coming to the dojo and started training, and we started doing some dark matches. I started getting on a few dark matches if I went to Ring of Honor shows. And then they decided they were going to change up the dojo system completely, which was it was just kind of you come to training when you want. It didn't cost anything, but you had to be invited. And I talked to some of the coaches, and they invited me, let me in. And maybe you would get an opportunity to do a dark match. And then one day they're like, "Hey, we're gonna sign some of you guys." And so they pulled 5 of us aside, and they offered us developmental contracts. And so we got to be we were kind of on their schedule, where we had training every day and film study and stuff like that. It was kind of like a little mini WWE developmental. And I made me remember what it was like to see other guys go up and other guys get on TV when you're just sitting there watching. And when I remember one day, one of our producers was there, and he's walking out, and he says, "Top Prospect Tournament's coming back." And I was thinking, I wonder if I'll be in that. And I was like, I wonder if I'll even be in the Top Prospect Tournament. And I was like thinking, oh, he probably wouldn't have said anything if I hadn't been there. And so I'll probably be in it. And then they asked me to be in it, and they asked me about like the dates I was going to be in it. And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to like win a match in this thing. And so it was, and then as it went, I realized that, oh, wow, when I made the finals, I was like, oh, wow, I could actually win the Top Prospect Tournament. And it was really cool for me. From a year before, I had felt like I lost everything with NWL shutting down. Like with NWL, I thought I was just going to live in Kansas City and be the NWL champion forever. And so I felt like I'd kind of lost everything. And it felt really good to kind of like rise from the ashes of that and realize that instead of that being the end of my wrestling journey, I used it as a springboard to bounce forward. And now I'm looking to capitalize on that as much as I can.
Indeed, and it was the ROH Top Prospect Tournament that gave you your much-deserved push and added recognition. So tell us, how, after winning that tournament, the Top Prospect Tournament, how did you feel a certain amount of justification for all of the hard work on the indies in the years before, since leaving WWE? Did you feel justified, and did you feel that you were really on an upward trajectory?
I feel like I'm on an upward trajectory, but I don't feel like it's justified yet. And I'll probably never feel like it's justified, I think, because I think the kind of person that I am is that you always want to get the next thing.
Yeah.
Like I get to one goal and it's like, well, okay, well, I won the Top Prospect Tournament, but I didn't win my TV title match. So how do I get that? And I'm sure if I win the TV title, I'm going to want the world title. But I think that's a trait of successful people where you're always looking for that next opportunity. Maybe someday I'll be the most famous wrestler in the world, and I will feel like it was all justified and it was all worth it. But I think I'll probably always be able to like set up new goals in my head that make me think that I have to achieve these goals in order to validate my past.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that motivates me too. It's definitely a big thing that motivates me, that I feel like everything that I've done and all the sacrifices I've made are for nothing if I just don't keep progressing up the ladder in wrestling.
That's the way it should be. That's exactly the way it should be. So I've got a couple more listener questions then. So good friend of the show, Kurt Johansson, has sent us a couple of questions. And the first one is about the Top Prospect Tournament. So having won the Top Prospect Tournament, a tournament that has propelled the career of yourselves and so many before you, who would you like to be given an opportunity in the next tournament, maybe from the independents?
I would love, in the next, oh man, there's so many guys I would like to name. And from the independents, there are a lot of guys you hear talked about a lot. This is a guy that I never see on lists. And part of it is because he has a family now, and so he doesn't get out as much as he should. But there's a guy named Devin Thomas that I've had in NWL. His name was Thor Terrio. He's an Omaha guy, and he is so good. And he's so easy to put a match together with. He reminds me of like if Bret Hart did a little bit more flying around, and if Bret Hart just like a 2020 Bret Hart, where he can work with anybody, he can have great matches with anybody, and the biggest thing, he's fun to wrestle. And I think Devin Thomas is a guy, and I point him out specifically because I think the ratio of how much he's known versus how much he should be known is completely off.
Great answer.
So yeah, it would be Devin Thomas. Also, Jake Durden. Jake Durden is he's a Midwest guy. He's like 6'8". He looks like Bruiser Brody, and he is so. I don't know how more people don't know of Jake Durden.
I'm going to look him up. I'm definitely going to look him up. But second question from Kurt. So having started your career in WWE, upon your departure from that company, did you ever consider stepping away from pro wrestling altogether?
No, never. I remember at my WWE tryout, at my first tryout, Norman Smiley showed one transition and then had me try it, and I was hooked. I knew this is what I want. I knew this is exactly what I wanted to do. and not even a second. When I got released, it was just like when I got to the performance center the day that I got released, and they said, "Hey, before training, swing by the office." My thought was like, "Well, I'll be on the Indies now." I've never thought about stepping away from wrestling.
Cool. And I've got a question from that guy at Dave HDN. I don't know if you know him, but he says, ask Dak about wrestling, Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame inductee in what turned out to be his final match. Do you know what he's referring to there? He's got hashtag rest in peace, Lord Littlebrook. So has that got any recollection for you there?
It wasn't Lord Littlebrook. It was Lord Littlebrook's son, Bobby.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I wrestled Bobby. We did a match where it was Dak Draper. When I was the NWL champion, it was Dak Draper takes on all comers, and Bobby is he's a smaller wrestler, and so I called it the Dak Draper Dreams Come True Challenge, and I said this is going to be this is the biggest dream that I've the biggest wish I've ever granted, and I wrestled Bobby, and something about Bobby, he did all, like, his showmanship was so good. He had a small robe on, and he came out, and he came out and he hit all his poses really well, and his hair swing was great, and it was fun. It was a comedy match, 6'5" guy versus 3'5" guy, but it was really I had actually ridden with some little people and trained with them a little bit through Pat Tanaka, but it was the first time I'd ever wrestled a little person in a match, and I thought it was a great challenge. I thought it was fun. I thought we had some really good little spots that we got in. It was an experience. It was a good experience.
Awesome.
And I think it's one of the things that made NWL special too.
Yeah, definitely.
And unfortunately, that was his last match. He passed away a few months later, and so I thought he was a great guy.
Yeah, awesome. I've got another question from a friend of the show, Mags, and Mags asks, a popular mindset around the internet wrestling community is that being part of the WWE in any way, shape or form adds value to the wrestler. In your experience, is that true, or is it like a milestone around your neck?
I think the best thing that I did was trying to stop promoting that I used to be in NXT so much. When I first was released, I feel like every poster I was on was former NXT star, now known as Sammy Six Guns, formerly Travis Tyler, and I started to tell promoters not to do that because I almost wanted people to forget that Travis Tyler existed, and I thought that's one of the best things I did because I didn't want to be known as someone who failed somewhere. I want to be known as someone who's still on the rise. And I think NXT was super beneficial fundamentals wise. I think about the fundamentals that I've learned and just the base that you have, the foundation that I have, I couldn't have learned that anywhere else in the time that I learned it. And that's what I think the biggest benefit was. I don't think the name, especially the way that wrestling is now, I don't think being associated with WWE is it's a feather in your cap. I have a lot of fun stories about when Braun Strowman used to cut promos, the lights were too bright, so I used to make him turn the lights down because he'd be squinting and stuff like that. I don't know, I have a few fun stories like that, but otherwise, I think the best thing is just it helped me have a really good foundation and helped me learn from a ton of Hall of Famers.
Yeah. Great answer. And final listener question from Get Cho Comedy Wrestling Podcast. They've asked a few questions in the past, and their question for you, Dak, is what's your go-to place to eat when you come back home to Colorado? So do you have a favorite restaurant when you come back home?
So when I go back to Colorado for Lucha Libre Laughs now, usually after a show, it's going to be Gossert, Ian Douglas Terry, Filter, Anaya, a bunch of the guys, Hunter Gray, those guys. We're going to go to McCoy's. McCoy's is I think it's called McCoy's Steakhouse. Maybe it is not a steakhouse. It's like if a Waffle House had a full bar. It is a wonderful place. You can go there and we joke that it's the Denver Ribera. It's like Ribera Steakhouse in Denver, where it's just if you wrestle for Lucha Libre and Laughs, we're going to McCoy's after the show, and I'm going to get an open-faced pot roast sandwich, and 2 pieces of pie. And it's if you haven't wrestled in Denver until you've eaten at McCoy's after the show. That's what I'm going to say.
Awesome. And I hope that Nick picks up the tab at the end of each meal, but maybe
Never
not.
does. We have to pay him a tax.
Indeed. But Dak, that's pretty much the end of our interview, this very special celebratory 150th episode of Wrestling with John's podcast. But before we say goodbye, it's an opportunity for you to throw out your social media handles. Where can we find you, reach out to you, say hi, and we'll learn more about Dak Draper on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or any merch you might have to plug. But plug away, the floor is yours, my friend.
Just follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Mile High Magnum, all one word. And my Pro Wrestling Tees store is linked there. I don't remember the address off the top of my head. So yeah, follow Mile High Magnum. I post a ton of shirtless pictures and really dumb stuff. So if you enjoy self-deprecating humor in your life, that's the page for you to follow.
And we'll make sure that all of them links are added to the description of this podcast. So if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, just click into the description and all the links are there. And we'll also add the link to your YouTube channel as well, because there's lots of cool content on there. But Dak, I wish you nothing but the best in your Ring of Honor career. When things do finally get back up and running, I truly hope that you get the opportunities and the success that you deserve with Ring of Honor, my friend. You know, you've been a fantastic guest on our very special 150th episode.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. It's been a fun time.